Hey Scotty, my name is Erica Carson. I am Chief Learning Officer at Trilogy Mentors. I'm here today to help you with this transition from in-person instruction to online instruction. I'll walk you through our technology today. I'll give you some tips on how to best use it for instructional purposes and give you some ideas for setting yourself up as well as troubleshooting. So just so you know, we have 4 different screens. We have our video screen, which you're on right now, and it's always going to be the place that you start. We have our text board. We have a drawing board or a whiteboard with smart technologies, and we have a screen sharing tool. And I'll dive a little further into all of those for you. So our video screen is always where you're going to land. It's a great place to check in with students and see how they're doing, talk about projects they've completed to date, as well as just ask them about their day, see how they're feeling. We know that 60 to 70% of communication is done through body language, so this is your opportunity to connect with your student before you get started. This is also a great place to come back to if you are in a session and you notice that your student's distracted or not engaged with what you're doing. You can kind of bring them back here, refocus them, give them a little breather so that they can re-engage with the learning. Or I always suggest at the end, you come back to this video screen and you give them an opportunity to reflect on what you discussed during the day, recap it, make sure they understood what you're learning, and talk about what's coming up, including the next session that you're going to have with them. I think it's really important to establish that consistency and that schedule with your students. So let's look at the different features on the video screen. Okay. I'm not going to point because it'll confuse you, just so you know everything is the opposite for the student who's on the other end. All right. So if you go to the bottom right corner of your screen, you'll see that there's your video box, and you'll see 2 small icons. One is a microphone and one is a camera. Couple of reasons to turn those off and on. The reason that you would turn the camera off is either to lessen the load on your Wi-Fi, because we know that sometimes that can interfere with the quality of the video and the quality of the experience. As long as you have audio, you should be okay. The other reason to turn it off is more on the student side. Sometimes students are just having a bad day, or they just don't feel comfortable on camera, and it's okay. As long as they can communicate with you through audio and all the different tools on the screen, you can go ahead and still have an effective session. In terms of the microphone, we know it's not good practice to be on a cell phone or in any other type of communication while you're in a session, but we do understand that emergencies happen either for the student or for yourself. It's really important to hit that mute button in those instances so the student isn't following or listening to your conversation. Or if you're having an emergency with a student, you don't want them hearing what you're talking about with either their parent or your administrator. So you have those 2 different options, and I'll show you really quickly what it looks like when I turn it off, and then I'm going to go ahead and have you turn it off as well so you can see how it works. So here I'm turning the camera off on my end, and you can see my screen goes black, and I'll have the student go ahead and do the same thing. Okay. So just so you have an understanding of how that works. All right. And then we're going to move on to the left side of the screen. And you'll see on the left side of the screen, you have your chat column and chat tab at the top, as well as your files tab. So what I'd like you to do first is go ahead and try using the chat box to make sure that tool works for you. Perfect. So there's a couple of reasons that we have this chat tool in place. One is so that you can communicate with the student in your regular session, but there's other indicators on here as well as the student entering the classroom, student leaving the classroom, and of course if you're having audio issues, this is a great way to communicate with a student to see where they're at. We do know that you can't both get into the session unless everybody's in the waiting room, so you know if you've gotten in and you don't see them entering, there might be something that you need to call support about. All right. Moving on to the second tab, which is the Files tab, you'll see that it's broken down into Classroom Files and My Files. The My Files is your folder that you have for instruction. You can add up to 35 different files in there at a time, and you can change them out as you'd like to. The student does not see these files. These are your instructor files. And the nice thing about this folder is that you can actually put files in there from your portfolio link on your dashboard, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. You can see I'm going to go ahead and share some files with you. I have a PDF I'd like to share, and as well as a graphic file. Let me just scroll down here, and I will share. I'd like to share some cool images with you so you can see later how nice it turns out on the screen. Now, we're not going to go and dive into those folders right now. We'll do it when we get to the drawing screen, but I just want to let you see how this works. Another thing to note is that while you're in the session, any files that you share in that classroom files will get attached to the session, as well as any files that you upload during the session. Those will also get attached to the session. So those are the features that we offer on our platform. But I want you to think a little outside the box here. Just because you're not in the in-person classroom doesn't mean you can't be creative on our online classroom. Our video chat gives you an opportunity to do some pretty creative things, like having a student jump up and push a chair, pull a chair, tell them that, hey, that's a force. You can talk about forces. You can do a cooking class that's all about measurement and math. You can also hold up manipulatives, teach them about flowers, talk about how the plants will grow, and get into little pieces of science that make it real for students. So our video classroom is a really great tool for taking students on trips. We know that there's certain situations that students can't leave their house, but you can take them on a field trip outside, teach them more about plants, teach them about engineering. It's a great opportunity to create some relevancy for students. All right, so now that we've wrapped up the different ways that you can use our video screen, we're going to go ahead and move on to our text board screen. The text board screen is really simple, but there's still opportunities to be creative with it. Let me walk you first through the features and have you walk through them with me. So the icons from left to right, you have bold, italics, underline. We also have brackets for those people that are interested in learning coding or teaching coding. Next to the brackets, we have a crayon that opens up a palette. And next to that, we have a little clipboard that allows you to copy everything on the screen. So I'll dive into these a little bit deeper. Okay, the bold, italics, underlined editing tools. If you go ahead and you type your word first, you can then apply those features or those edits to what you've written. If you'd like to type in a different color, you go ahead and click on your crayon, pick a different color, and type away. The nice thing with this is that anything that you're typing, the student is seeing in real time on the other side. Scotty, can you see that okay?
Yes, I can.
Can you go ahead and make that bold and underlined italicized for me?
Absolutely. How's that?
Perfect. You have the opportunity here to work with students, but it's important to make the distinction between what you're writing and what they're writing. Sometimes students come from schools with really strict honor codes, so having the student write in one color and you write in another color, that can be helpful. You don't have to do it, but it's highly suggested that you give this a go. And if you have the recording option, this is a great way for the students to go back and look at the video and make sure they understand what you were writing, what they were writing, and what your meaning was behind the edits that you made with them. Okay. This last icon here, the copy to the clipboard, is really great if you have students who are working on an external document. So they can copy from a Word doc or a Google Doc or any other document. They can copy the text and paste it in here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit return, and I'll show you some of the text that I've copied and pasted. Right? And you can go back and analyze this paragraph together, highlighting things in different color fonts, breaking them down, or maybe you just want to have a student give you a summary after what they've read. Now, you're not going to fit a whole book on here per se, but this is great for snippets that you want to address. Another great way to use this page is for spelling words, sentence writing, anything that you think will be helpful to improving the student's writing. We know that in our math video, Scotty shows you how to use this page to break down word problems, which can be a challenge for students who are struggling with reading already. It's a pretty straightforward screen. So of course, if you need ideas for how to use this board in more creative ways, feel free to reach out to our team. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and move on to our drawing board, also called our whiteboard with smart technologies. It is not a smart board because that is a brand, but it does have smart technologies on it for you to use with your students. This is a screen that students get really excited about. Something to keep in mind is that our whiteboard is touch screen compatible. So if you do have a device that allows for touchscreen options, you can use that. And that includes Chromebooks, that includes iPads, tablets, any of those tools that should work with that. We are not Kindle compatible, so if that is something you have, that will not work with the technology. All right, so let's look at the features from the icons left to right. The first icon you'll see there is a little arrow with a box. I'm actually going to go ahead and make some lines on the page, and that will work with. I'm going to go ahead and click on that cursor. And you can see that when I do, I get the option to click on objects, move them around. I can shrink objects, I can spin objects, and I can also delete objects. This cursor tool works in the foreground and the background, and I'll dive into that a little bit more as we move forward. Something to keep in mind is that your student cannot see your cursor. So if you want to point something out, it's important that you circle it, that you underline it, or that you draw an arrow so they know specifically what you're talking about. The next icon that we're looking at is the pencil tool. If you go ahead and click on that, you'll see that to the right of the letter A, you have the crayon and you have options for different pencil weights. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the crayon tool and select a different color. I'm also going to go ahead and click on the different pencil weights and draw with that. One of the things I do suggest is if you're working with younger students is to use the higher pencil weights. So the options there would be 10, 15, or 20. And that's because a lot of the kids like to color. And when they do color a lot with a fine pencil, it can sometimes freeze your screen. So I discourage using the skinnier pencils for the younger kids. The next thing I want to focus on here, and I'm going to go ahead and clean the screen for you first by clicking on the garbage can in the top right and clicking clear, is our text tool. You can actually go ahead and click on the letter A at the top, which is the text tool, and you can click on the screen, and you can go ahead and write whatever your message is. Okay? The nice thing about this is you can go back and edit anything that you're writing. So I can go ahead and click on this with the cursor, and it brings me right back to the editing options. So to the right of the letter A, I have the crayon tool, which will allow me to go ahead and change the color if I want. I have the small a, large a, which allows me to change the size of the text that I've written. And I have that letter T there that allows me to change the different type of font that I'm using. And you can see that my text is kind of smushed into 2 lines. I can go ahead now and click on the cursor and stretch my box. I can do the same things that I can do with the lines, and I can stretch my fonts. I can spin my text. I can also click on it and delete it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. All right. One of the things that you can also do with the text box, if you just open a box, you can actually go ahead and paste other text that you have in. Okay. I did get a message for too many characters. character limit is 1,000, but obviously if you want to write a little bit more than that, use a text screen, but this is a good opportunity to like break down a paragraph, especially if you want students to be able to draw something, or if you want to do a Venn diagram based on what's in there. So you can do some different things with this tool. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and click this little thing that looks like a candy bar at the top. That is your eraser. That can erase any lines or text that's in the foreground. All right. Scotty, do you want to try out the pencil tool so I know that it works for you okay?
Sure thing.
All right, perfect. I always say, like, give kids an opportunity to try out the board and play with it. They're going to be curious about it. But again, trying to keep them focused and engaged. This is a great opportunity for you to create relevancy with some of the things the kids are learning. So one of the things that's really nice is if you wanted to do a math problem, just say 5 times 5. I can show kids that this is actually 5 groups of 5. So, if I wanted to just draw this out, I can do this really quickly. Or have them do it because they actually like drawing. So this is a great opportunity for them to help you out while you're teaching. Another thing that you can do is you can have them draw a character that you've been reading about in a book. So, for example, I was talking about Anne of Green Gables, and often you talk about her red hair. So that would be something really cool. I would ask the student, like, hey, can you draw me a picture of what you think Anne looks like? Or draw me a picture of what you think Anne's house looks like. So it gives them a chance to put 2 different things together, their ideas for creativity as well as their skills for reading and comprehension. All right. Again, we're going to go up to the top right corner of your screen, and you'll see that there's a W and an H that have 1,000 by 1,000 in them. That's actually the height of the canvas and the width of the canvas. You can go up to 5,000 by 5,000, but I highly discourage that for a couple of reasons. One, the larger the pixels, the bigger the load on the screen. The other reason I discourage it is sometimes the kids can get lost. So the bigger the screen, the more likely you're going to get separated from your student in the classroom. So keeping it at 1,000 by 1,000 or something lower is totally fine. All right. So now we're getting to the even more exciting part. We're going to go ahead and look at how we use the files in our file folder on this screen. Something to keep in mind is that the only files that you can drop on at this time are PDFs and graphic files. Graphic files including JPGs, JPEGs, and PNGs. I do suggest that if you're going to do multiple pages on a PDF, that you use our screen sharing tool. But if you're going to use 1 or 2 pages that you're going to break down with students, that a worksheet or something like that, this is a great place to drop files in to work with students. So Scott, I'm going to have you go ahead and click that Files tab below your video. You'll see that there's now little blue boxes next to each of the files. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So I'd like you to start with the graphic file first. Go ahead and click on that blue box next to the word Earth and drag and drop that onto the screen. Perfect. So it takes a second or two to load, but this is a great way to interact with the kids with exciting topics that you can pull pictures from the internet, and we'll go into this a little further. So I want you to see that I can grab the pencil and I can make an arrow pointing to something I want the kids to learn about. I can also go ahead and use the text box and write something like, "This is really hot." Or have the kids write their own words to describe things. Okay. So, Scotty, go ahead and write something on there.
All right.
Awesome. Alrighty. Something to keep in mind that all the images actually drop into the background. So if I click on the image, similar to the lines in the text, I can actually move it around. I can shrink it. I can spin it, whatever it is you want to do. But you'll also see that the drawings and the text didn't move. So the drawings and the text will stay in the foreground and the image will always stay in the background. So the nice thing about this though is if I want to reuse my image, I can go ahead and erase anything that was written on top of it. Like if I had a worksheet and there was an answer that was incorrect, I can really easily start again. The other thing I can do is I can go ahead and drop an image on top. So now I'm going to drop something that's unrelated on top just so you can see that you can have more than one image on here at a time. Okay. And this is a great way if you want to set up transitions from one subject to another. You can shrink them, you can put them below. They will layer on top of each other depending on how they were loaded onto the screen. Alrighty. In order to get rid of any images that you've dropped on the screen, you won't be able to use the eraser, but you can use the cursor to click on it and hit delete, or you can go ahead and hit that garbage can in the top right corner and hit clear. All right, so we're going to move on to working on PDFs. PDFs are really simple as well, but the difference is it's going to ask you which page of the PDF you want. So Scotty, I'm going to have you drag and drop that life science PDF in there. Select whichever page works for you. I just want to let people see that it's a little bit of a different process. Perfect. And again, same thing as with the other graphic files. You can click on these, you can move them around, you can write on top of this, hey, this is your assignment, or you want to let them know you talk to the student which date it's due by, so you can say March 31st, 2020, so that they know. All right, so that's the basics for adding different images, different PDFs to our whiteboard. And feel free to get creative with things. You can actually create your own little flashcards and slide them from left to right to meet each other if you're working on word foundations or sounding out words with younger children. You can do a matching game with students. If you're playing Jeopardy to practice with them to study for a test, you can be fairly creative on this screen. One thing I do suggest, if you don't have a scanning app on your phone, if you happen to have a smartphone, there are two different apps that I suggest, depending on whether you have an Android phone or you have an iPhone. So iPhone has a tool, scanning app, called Scannable, ironically. And it is a free tool that allows you to scan documents just like you have your own portable Xerox machine. The version that they have for an Android phone is called Office Lens. There are other options out there. This is just what we recommend. It's a great way if you want to get a workbook page or a book that the child is reading, you want to get an image to work on, you can scan it, send it to yourself, and upload it here pretty easily. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and erase that. The next tool I want to share with you is our camera tool. This is really, really cool because sometimes kids would rather write things down, or you're working on a math problem. It's just way easier to have them show you what they're working on a piece of paper. So I have a notebook I want to hold up, or I'm reading a book and I want to hold up the book to the student and make sure that they have that in their files, what book we were talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and have Scotty try this out. So Scotty, go ahead and click on that camera icon in the bottom right corner. When that window opens up, you're going to see that there's a camera icon as well as a clock icon right next to that. These give you the option to take an instant picture, or clock gives you an option to a little countdown for taking the picture. I always opt for the clock because it gives me a couple seconds to get my document in place. So go ahead and click on that. If you have a document to grab or a book to grab, Scotty, go ahead and hold that up and take a picture. And then after you've taken that picture, go ahead and click share.
There we go. You want me to drag it on the screen?
Yeah, if you could, you'll see that it shows up as session capture at the top of our classroom files. Your newest drop-in, your newest scan will always show up at the top. So go ahead and grab that blue box and go ahead and drop it on the screen. Well, it's been a long time since I've seen those things. But yes, this is a great way to help your students review things. So if I were a student and I said, hey, Scotty, what does this mean? You can go ahead and explain it to me in that situation. We don't need to go over that right now, but I do want to let people know that you have this option. Another thing is, if you're a student, you are working with them and you have a student that gets nervous with reading or other activities, sometimes I'll give students a tag in, tag out option. So they can maybe hold up their notebook and say, hey, I'm tagging you in. It's your turn to read. I'm tired. I need a break. Or, hey, can we stop because I don't understand half of the words on the page, so that you can review them with them. So using the video along with the drawing board to go over different things, to dive deeper into ideas and concept is a great way to use this tool. We've covered how to drop images in through your own scanning app, through uploading and dropping the files into your portfolio and dragging them over, as well as using the camera. But one thing I want to drive home is there are lots of other ways to use the board as well. I use it to play hangman with spelling words with students and have them play the game back with me. It's a great way to engage them in learning. I also will play tic-tac-toe, maybe consonants versus vowels, or mammals versus reptiles. But just being creative about how you use the board here. You're only limited by your imagination. Now that we've covered 3 of the 4 screens, I want to talk to you a little bit about troubleshooting. So there are different things that you can do to troubleshoot while you're working on the screen. One of the easiest things to do is just hit the refresh button, which is a little blue button above your head, and that usually will ping the Wi-Fi and bring it back like, hey, Wi-Fi, wake up. So it'll kickstart it again. If that doesn't work, you can change browsers. I always say that it's a good idea to have 2 browsers. So if you have Safari, have Firefox or Chrome as a backup, or if you have Chrome, have Firefox as a backup. That way, if there are any updates to the browser that you're working with, it won't affect you with your session with your student. You always have a fallback to go on to. Another thing that you can do is you can switch devices. We are compatible on laptops, desktops, iPads, tablets, Chromebooks. Again, we don't work with Amazon Kindles at this point, but who knows what's coming in the future. The next thing I would suggest is going ahead and restarting your computer. If that doesn't work, lots of times there's just a camera issue or an audio issue, not turning on permissions or not giving permission on your browser. So make sure before you get started with your student that you've checked to see that all of these things have been set up. Since we've covered talking about troubleshooting, let's talk about your teaching environment. So it's really important to think about what's behind you. If you have something that's distracting to the student, that they're not going to focus in on what you're teaching, or you have something that's inappropriate for the student, it's really important to get those out of the way or just move to a location where those won't be a factor. The other thing to keep in mind is that they're seeing your head and your neck pretty close up. So think about your appearance and moving in and out of the camera, what the kids are seeing, where your neckline is at as far as interacting with the students. You don't want to create distractions that have nothing to do with the teaching. So another thing I want to talk to you about in your environment beyond what's directly around you is noise. Noise can be a super distracting factor for students, so it's really important that you get a headset. The headset will help keep the noise to a minimum. It'll help the kids not get distracted by other conversations or even your pets making noise in your house. It's pretty easy to get off task when you hear a dog barking or a kid crying or any other noise that just might be something for the child to focus on. So you can find headsets pretty easily at the store or on Amazon. I happen to have picked up a gaming headset recommended by a friend, as well as some business headsets from companies like Logitech that are designed for business conversations online. So getting a headset with a microphone is really, really helpful as far as working with students. It'll also help you stay focused because it's really easy to get distracted by noises when you're in a session. So another point I want to talk about, and kind of alluded to this at the beginning of this video, is really thinking outside the box. A lot of times teachers get stuck because they look at what online learning doesn't have when compared to an in-person classroom. And I challenge you to not think that way. I challenge you to look at this as a whole nother medium to reach the same goal. And as I said before, you're really only limited by your imagination. There are great things that you can do with this tool, like taking students on adventure, doing a math lesson related to cooking. There's so many opportunities to have them jump up and move around the room. Even if you wanted to teach child phys ed, you can have them jump up and do jumping jacks. There's nothing to stop you from having kids get engaged in a new way that's really exciting and relevant to them. So now that we've covered the first 3 screens, I'm going to show you our screen sharing tool. This is actually a tool that we added based on instructors' feedbacks that will help you share things that you can't drop into our whiteboard. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this little icon on the bottom left, and you'll see that it says share my screen, and it gives you kind of a warning to make sure that you close all your other windows. So again, so you don't have extra distractions in your lesson. And I'm actually going to go ahead and click share my screen. And it'll give me another little window option that asks me which screen I want to share. So I'm going to go ahead and share my entire screen for now. And then Scotty, I'll have you do the same thing. Okay. So you should be able to see my Trilogy Mentor screen right now. And you see my cursor moving around the screen. All right. I'm actually going to go ahead and on one of my tabs, I'm going to add Crash Course, which is a great place I like to go with students to learn things. And I'm going to click on a history video. Do you see that, Scotty?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, awesome. And at this point, you can actually play a video with the student and talk about it while it's going on. So that's what happens when you open up another tab or switch to another tab. Another thing that you can do, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen for a second. I'm going to open up Crash Course actually in a new window. And then I'm going to share my screen again. And it'll ask me now which window I want. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Crash Course window. I'm going to go back to that window. And here's a little trick I like to do. I actually will just resize the external window so it fits in to the size of the Trilogy Mentors platform screen, so I could still look at my students while we're working on watching this video. And that's just a way I know some people like to keep an eye on what their students doing while they're teaching. That's an easy fix to that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Scotty, go ahead and share your screen.
All right.
And if you don't have a tab open, I'm going to go ahead and have you go to the same website that I just checked out, which is Crash Course. And you can Google Crash Course at YouTube.
All right.
All right, so now you can see that I can see Scott
Hi,
on
I'm
one
Hank Green.
side
Welcome to
as
Crash Course.
the other person, and we have the videos there for us to look at together. Now, it's going to look different for the student than it does for the instructor, so something to keep in mind as you're working through it. Asking the students, hey, what are you seeing, is super helpful. Always checking in, because you don't want a student to get frustrated because they feel lost and they can't follow along with you. All right, awesome. All right, so that concludes how everything on our platform works. But what I do want to do next is take you on a tutorial of what your instructor dashboard will look like. So we're going to pause for a second here, and then we're going to jump right into that. So let's get started taking a look at your instructor dashboard. To the left side of the screen, you'll see there are a bunch of tabs, and we'll walk through each of them so you can see what your options are here. In the center top of the screen, you'll see that you have your join button because you have a session booked with a student. All you have to do to enter the classroom is go ahead and click that orange join button. If you don't have a session, you have an option there to get into our demo classroom where you can play around with the tools and maybe get some good ideas for working with your students. Below that join button, you'll see that there's a calendar with your upcoming sessions. It's important to keep an eye on this so you know what sessions are coming up, and make sure that you have this consistency with your students. If they're not showing up or if you need to reschedule, make sure you're keeping on top of that, because we know consistency is key. So if you move to the center right of your instructor dashboard, you'll see that you have your messaging box here. That'll give you a list of all the messages that have been communicated between you and your students. You can actually click on the new messages box there, and it'll allow you to select which student you want to reply to. It'll be pre-populated for you, and you can just go ahead and send a message that way. If you click on any of the messages there, it'll bring you to your messaging board with all of the messages you've had, or if you click view all, it'll also take you to that messaging board. Below the messaging menu, I'm going to scroll down here a little bit, you'll see that you have your little portfolio menu here. It's only giving you the first few documents or PDFs in your menu. If you want to see all of them, go ahead and click on the View All button at the bottom, and it will take you to the portfolio page where you can review the files that you have in your instructor folder. You can delete them, you can edit the file that you have, or you can go ahead to the right side of the screen there and upload new files. Remember the type of file that you want to use when you're working with your students. Again, for the whiteboard, you would want to stick to graphic files and PDFs. Other files would just be shared with the student, but you wouldn't be able to use them on the drawing board. However, you can use any file when you're sharing the screen. I'm going to head back to the homeroom, which is your dashboard, and we'll take a look at the other menus here. To the far right of your screen, you'll see that you have your student list, and it'll show you sessions that you've had with that student, the time, and it'll actually allow you to click on the message envelope to send that student a message, or to go ahead and click on the post-session report link, and I can go ahead and see the report that was sent to that student that I filled out. I can see that if I haven't filled out the report yet, I can go ahead and fill it out now. So just because you didn't have time to fill out the report at the end of session doesn't mean you can't go back to it and fill it out. Alrighty, I'm going to head back to the dashboard again. And just to keep note, there is a tiny little messaging option in the bottom right corner of the screen if you need support from the Trilogy Mentors team. Now, let's go back to this left menu of tabs. The first option there below the homeroom is the calendar. This calendar is really wonderful in giving you a full monthly view, a weekly view, or a list view of the sessions that you have coming up. I'm going to head back to the weekly view and show you that you can actually block out time and make yourself unavailable and hit save there. Okay. Make sure you hit that little checkbox I just showed you, and I can actually go back and click on it, and I can update it and make myself available if I want to, or delete it. Okay. I can also click on a session that I have and find out the details of it. But for the most part, it's going to default to your monthly view. Okay. And let's go ahead and look again quickly at your messaging board. This is another way to get to the messaging board I was showing you earlier. You can create a new message by clicking the new message button at the top, or you can go ahead and click on a specific message and reply to it on the right hand side of the screen. Below the messaging link is the session link. This will show you all of the sessions that you have had or have with students. And again, you can go and click on this little camera icon over on the right. I'm going to go ahead and click on one of these. There you go. Okay, so you can go ahead and see how that's another way to get to the session report. And also you'll see below you have the documents that were used during that session. And then if your program or your organization has recording options, you can go ahead and click the view session, and it'll play back the session that you've just had with your student. Now, I'm not going to do that right now, but know that that is an option there. All right. Again, let's head back to your screen here. I'm going to click on portfolio. We just went through this, just showing you that that's another option or tool for getting to this page. Notifications, any messages that have been sent to you through the system will be in here. I can go ahead and click on the message and it'll tell me the details. And if it's something to do with the session, it'll give you the option to log in right away. Like if you're running late, as it might say here, I can go ahead and jump in my session that way. I'm going to go ahead and back here on this menu. I'm going to click in the booking tool. This is probably your most important tool for working with your students. You can see that I have a drop down menu here of all the different students that I've worked with. I can just go ahead and select a student here. I'm just going to hit TM student for now. I can pick online or in person. Most instances it's going to be an online student. I want to pick how long the session is. You have an option for an hour, hour and a half, or 2 hours. And then I am going to select when it should take place. So I'm going to pick today's date. And all of these populate in order. And if you leave one out, it will remind you that you haven't selected a time or date. Again, here are the availability times that I have and that student has. And I am going to go ahead and put in the subject. For this, we'll just say training. I'm going to hit training here. Boop. And I would just go ahead and book the session. I'm actually not going to do that right now, but I want you to see here in the center of the screen, it automatically populates that that's a good time for everybody. You get your little checkbox. If it was red, that means that the instructor or the student, that means you or the student, don't have the availability. And if it's yellow, that means you didn't put the availability in your schedule, but you're not booked with another student. So just know that those are the different indicators that will appear on your screen. Back to our menu. I'm going to click on students here. This will give me a list of all the different students that I have worked with the last time I had a session with them in the center. See the little green person there? That lets me know that they're online. So if a student isn't showing up and you're worried about whether they forgot or not, you can go ahead and put in their name and see if their little icon here on your student board shows up as green or red. Red being that they're not online, green being that they are. To the right, you'll see you have the option to email a message to that student, to add a note regarding that student, or view the contacts for that student. So you can go ahead and click on the contacts. All right, so you get the parent's email, the parent's phone number, so you can contact them right away if they did happen to forget that they had a session. We're gonna go here and look at your profile. It's really important that you put in a picture here. It just makes it more comfortable when your student is interacting with you, if they can see a picture. So go ahead and you can click browse, upload your picture, make sure it's a size that's focused on your face, and not so far away that they can't really see what you look like. And make sure also that the lighting is good in the picture, because darker pictures can be kind of intimidating. All right. This option down here allows you to change your password. It takes about 2 seconds to do this really quickly. Just wait for the confirmation after you've clicked change password. If you forgot it and you haven't logged in yet, there is an option on the login page that says forgot password, and you can go through the steps there to reset your password. Personal details here, pretty straightforward. Your first name, last name, email. It's really important that you add your email and phone number here. If Trilogy Mentors needs to get a hold of you, or if a parent needs to get a hold of you, that's the fastest way for us to get a hold of you. So make sure you do enter your number there. Then you have the options here for adding the subject areas that you're an expert in. I'm going to put art, fine arts, hobbies. It's great if kids can know what your interests are. And then I could put a little tagline that'll show up in my profile, as well as experience that I've had. This kind of gives everybody a big picture of who you are and who the student will be working with. As far as the last few tabs here, we have your education, kind of gives somebody a background on where you've gone to school or where you are going to school. You have a feedback tab. This is a direct way to send a message to Trilogy mentors. If you're having any technical issues or feedback on maybe some features that we're at or something that just wasn't working as fluidly as you had hoped, go ahead and hit that feedback tab and send us a message. And of course, if you want to log out, you're all done with your session, go ahead and click that log out. And it'll bring you back to the login page, which just quickly, again, I want to point out that forgotten password link right here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and bring us back to our video board, which I said is a great place to always end your sessions. All right, and just recap what we talked about again. So we talked about thinking outside the box when you're using our different screens. We talked about making sure you're set up with what's behind you, a good headset before you even get into the classroom. And we talked about really diving in and understanding the different technologies that you're working with. And of course, if you need help with strategies and instruction, I'm here for you. My name again is Erica Carson, and I am the Chief Learning Officer of Trilogy Mentors. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I hope that you found this helpful. Have a good one.